Hey guys, welcome back for another episode of Not the Girl Next Door. I'm your host, Meg Reynolds, and for today's episode, we're talking about decentering men, a topic that I've kind of briefly discussed on the podcast before, but I don't think I've really dove into it as much as I should. And because at our core, when we talk about decentering men, a lot of people think that automatically assumes you're a man hater. And I know half the internet probably thinks that I am a man hater because I have a clip going viral right now from a couple weeks ago when I made the joke about like, oh, men should want to date man haters. Yeah, that's going viral. And of course, the men don't understand the joke of it all and what I was trying to say. But, you know, hey, rage bait content works. But that got me thinking about the topic of decentering men, what it actually means, what it actually looks like. And, you know, can you at your core still yearn for love while decentering men? And in my opinion, yes. Like decentering men to me is not about this idea that you can never want love, never get married, that you need to be the spinster in the book who just wants to have her freedom. Like that to me is not what decentering men is about. And, you know, at my core, I am someone who is a hopeless romantic. And I grew up on all the rom-coms and the Disney princess movies. And, you know, so much of my identity and your identity as a woman is our desire to be loved, our desire for partnership, our desire for marriage. And so much of that shapes a woman's identity and her choices in life. And that is what decentering men is about, is making sure the choices that you make are not for the sake of a man, especially one that's just living in your imagination. And, you know, I've said it on the podcast before that Disney lied to us growing up. Disney lied to us. All these rom-coms lied to us. There is no one coming to save us, that if a boy is mean to you, it doesn't mean that he likes you. But the thing about lies, and the best liars in the world will tell you this, is all the best lies have a little bit of truth in them. And each of those stories and films does have a little bit of truth in the sense that the person that you love the person that you're meant to be with is going to choose you. And even though at the end of every rom-com, you've got two characters are so wildly incompatible, they're at the end of the day still choosing each other. And that is what love is all about. And it's not about needing to change yourself to be chosen, which so often is where women go awry when it comes to dating. You know, at my core, I believe in partnership. I believe in romance. I believe in monogamy. I believe in doing the whole white picket fence thing, but making it look different to fit myself and my life and the things I want for myself. And, you know, but at the same time, this show was born out of my need to stop building my entire life around men and partnership and all these things. And you know, that can coexist. My desire for love and romance and my hyper independence and my ability to build a life entirely for myself can coexist, because today we're going to talk about exactly how that is, exactly how I've done it, exactly how you can do it too. Because again, when people hear you talk about decentering men, their mind automatically goes to a lot of the times that you're bitter, that you're cynical, that, oh, you got cheated on once and now you hate all men. Like they hear avoidance, they hear you're giving up. And while, yes, I'm currently single and I have been single, that doesn't mean I haven't been dating. And, you know, bitter is not a word I would use to describe myself in terms of dating, not even a little bit. Like, I still so much believe in love, but the thing is, I refuse to dull myself down any longer to accommodate a man's inadequacy. And so much of my life has been spent doing that. And I was talking about this with a friend of mine the other day, and it kind of just sums up how I feel about modern dating. And I think how a lot of women feel about modern dating is I'm just so unimpressed with men. Like it's very rare that I meet a man nowadays who I find inspiring, who really I feel like lights a fire of me intellectually, and who I can connect with in that way. Like so often, and I'm sure so many women feel like this, is like you'll develop a crush and then you actually get to know that crush and you're like, fuck, you kind of suck, dude. And it's the disappointment all over again and again and again. And I actually read a fascinating article. The article is called Gen Z Will Never Be Breadwinners. The statistics in this are genuinely something that struck me. And it's information I already knew. Like, I wouldn't say it's information that surprised me, but basically the statistics showed how more Gen Z men believe women should submit to their husbands and obey their husbands, and using all these phrases, and that the men should be the breadwinner. However, the statistics when it comes to career and education don't align with that. Women are outpacing men in career. We are outlearning men in education, and we're out earning men at historic rates. So the statistics and the gap in that shows the response of Gen Z men. And again, it sums up men as a whole, that for some reason, when women rise up and they thrive, for some reason it makes men feel threatened, and they can't seem to coexist with the idea that women can be just as, if not more successful as them. And it doesn't say anything about them or their masculinity. Like, I don't think me making more money than a man makes him any less of a man. I don't think it makes him unworthy of me. I'm not going to sit here and say I'll only date a guy if he makes $200K a year and is 6'5". Like, I would say the vast majority of women don't think like that. What is the problem for myself and a lot of women is the ambition gap, the passion gap. If you don't have something that you are passionate about, and you don't have something that, you get nerdy about, that is what's unappealing to me. That, like, I need to be like intellectual hotness, like being an intellectual is a turn on to me, and it's a turn on to a lot of women. And I don't know how it is that women can get. Unfortunately, I think it's going to be a men's job. It's a blue job to get through to other men to open their eyes and see this issue. But because women have been screaming this from the rooftop for decades, and men just simply are not listening. Men want the power and the control that comes with being a provider without actually doing any sort of providing. And, they want to be in charge of women's lives without pulling any weight in their own lives, and they don't want her to have any sort of say in their lives. And I kind of saw a glimmer of this up close too. Like, men want to be the heads of the household without actually contributing, or like they can't handle any sort of mental load. To them, providing is just money, money, money. They can't handle any sort of mental load. And I kind of saw a glimmer of this up close with Mr. New Year's. I don't know if you guys remember him, but the reason things ended with him was quite literally so simple as he was unwilling to prioritize a relationship in all of his busy schedule, which is like a valid excuse, right? Except his busy schedule was not just about the fact that he was starting a new job. He literally used the excuses of, I have to cook dinner, I have to do my laundry, I have to go to the gym, like I have to run my errands, like all these very mundane adult things that are just part of everyday life that are not going away. These aren't emergencies. These aren't temporary circumstances. These are fixed factors of life. And the fact that they were used as an excuse to not want a relationship, honestly I was like, cool. That was just such a turnoff to me, because again, I'll always say there is nobody busier than somebody who is not interested in you. And so that was probably his way of telling me he was not interested, which is fine. But it's the fact that I could see how genuinely stressed out he was with doing all these things in life and balancing all this stuff. And it's like, dude, you're in your 30s. Like, yes, you still have time, but you've been doing this on your own for so long. Like, I don't understand it. And basically, it kind of made me realize most men go one of two ways, where they are like that and they shut down and the idea of getting into a relationship is so stressful, or they go the opposite way, where the only reason they want a relationship is to divide and conquer their responsibility, like someone to divide and conquer the responsibilities with them, and basically someone to just, but really they want women to absorb the domestic load and be a live-in chef, a live-in maid, and like, so that they can just get on with their life, go golfing with their buddies and thrive. And so when women are no longer complying with that system and we're making our own money, we're doing all these things, it's a threat to men's egos. And so their response is to try and control women. So that's why part of decentering men is it's not just about, it's not about decentering love, it's about decentering power. Decentering men means you are taking the power back, and it doesn't mean you don't want love. It just means you're going to be more selective of who you give your love to. And that's why I'm saying decentering love is not about rejecting any desire for connection. And you're going to be the lone wolf who goes and lives in the woods and I don't need anybody and the closest town is 50 miles away from me. Like that is not what decentering men is about. It's you're not basing your life choices, your life path, your career decisions, your everything about yourself. A man is no longer the center of your world. And so I want you to genuinely ask yourself right now, looking at your past relationships, how often have you made a decision based on a man? I know I'm the number one offender of this. Like I think back to when I was in my long-term college relationship and I always say him breaking up with me was the best thing that he ever did for me, because it gave me my freedom back and it gave me my life back. Had the opportunity to move to Nashville presented itself while we were still together and I wanted to take it, he would not have moved for me. I don't think he would have ever moved for me. And I have a feeling, knowing my younger self, I 1000% would have turned down the opportunity because I wouldn't have wanted to leave him. And I will be so real about that. Now it's like I'm no longer basing where I want to go and what I want to do around whether or not I'm going to find a partner there. Like I keep sitting here saying, maybe my partner isn't in Nashville. Maybe my person's not in Nashville, but I'm not ready to leave Nashville. So I'm not going to. Like, I'm not going to move to a city just for love. And it makes you think too of how often have you not made plans with your girlfriends because the guy you're texting may want to do something Friday night. Like you're not revolving your plans around a husband or even a boyfriend. You're literally evolving them around an imaginary figure, like your imaginary boyfriend. And you're keeping, like, we as women need to stop keeping our schedules open for somebody who hasn't even asked us to make plans. And that is what decentering men is all about. Because here's the thing, there is a cost to love. And I know no one wants to talk about that. No one wants to admit that. Love does have a cost in some capacity. You no longer have the same freedom that you did. And I'm not saying that is a bad thing. It just means you now have a person to consider in the relationship. So when you choose to get into a relationship, you need to decide what is the price that you're willing to pay. And when it comes to decentering men, you should no longer be willing to pay the price of your alone time, your friendships, your family, your opportunities, your sense of self. The price for love should never be any of those things. Like, yes, you are going to lose some of your time and you may not be able to go out with your friends as often as you like, or you may, have to split holidays between your family and his. That is not the price that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the isolation, the control, all of the toxic things that come with toxic relationships. And so you have to ask yourself, what is the cost I'm willing to pay? And so whatever you're giving up in order to make the relationship work, or whatever you're willing to give up for a hypothetical relationship, you need to be prepared to lose that forever. If you're going to cut people off for the sake of making your partner happy, you need to be prepared that if and when you probably break up with that person, those people will not be there waiting for you. If you suddenly go ghost on your friends when you get into a relationship, you need to be prepared that if you do break up, that they may not be there waiting for you when they get back. That does not make them bad friends. I feel like there's this standard too of, you're a bad friend if you go ghost on your friend who gets into a relationship. And it's like, well, actually, if they completely change the dynamic of your friendship and they no longer behave in any sort of way that you could consider a good friend, they're going MIA, they're bailing on you, they're canceling on you last minute, they don't show up for you anymore at all. I'm not saying friendships don't change when people get into relationships. They absolutely do. But if your friendship is completely unrecognizable and the dynamic is completely different, I think it's totally fair for you to walk away from it. That's my personal opinion. So the question at the end of the day isn't whether or not love is worth the sacrifice. The question becomes, what price are you actually willing to pay for love? Thinking back to that college relationship, I consider that my first love and my first real heartbreak. Yeah, I had boyfriends before that, but I consider him my first real devastating heartbreak. And having that happen when I was 20 years old, I was a vastly different woman than I am today. And that relationship very much shaped the woman I've become. But the thing about that love is that it was never built to last. And I firmly believe he was meant to be in my life, but meant to be doesn't always mean meant to stay. And the thing is, he really was the center of my entire world. I based so much of myself around him. I started working out for him. I couldn't sit there and say that honestly. And And so when he left, I felt lost because I felt like I had nothing to stand on. Like, think about it. This person that I centered everything around and was planning an entire future around was suddenly gone. And that's what centering a man does to you. It doesn't just break your heart. It breaks the foundation of who you are. And that's why it's so important to not center your life around a man, so that, even if you've met what you think is the love of your life, you need to be so sure of yourself that, God forbid, something happens in that relationship where you need to walk away, you have the strength to do so. That is what decentering men is about, is knowing that no matter what happens, you have yourself and you are going to be just fine. And so it's not about removing a woman's desire for love. I think women are naturally filled with so much love to give to all friendships, romance, like all of these things. I think it's human and natural to want love, but when you take away someone's desire to be loved, you need to ask yourself, who are they at their core? And you need to be able to identify what makes you you when you remove that need to be loved. And if you can't answer those things, then probably men are more at the center of your world than you care to admit. So how can you actually do it? How do you decenter love? How do you date? How do you stay open? How do you not shrink back into your toxic ways? How do you beat your anxious attachment? How do you re-engage with the dating world while still keeping yourself at the center of your life? And I read this book years ago. It's called How to Date Men When You Hate Men. And it's honestly if you're looking for a book to read, it's a great satirical piece on modern dating. And it really does have a lot of great insight to it. I'm actually currently reading All About Love by Bell Hooks, which is another great read to get clarity on your love life. Same thing with Attached. Those are some really great book recommendations I have on dating, if that's something you're interested in. But again, the desire for a fulfilling romantic relationship is one of the most human things out there. And I'm not here to tell you to suppress it. I'm telling you how to pursue it without losing yourself in the process. And so the biggest key part of all that is needing strong boundaries. You need to have such strong boundaries around yourself and your life that no one can derail that. I've said this analogy so many times on the podcast, and I'm going to say it again because I haven't said it in a minute, and I know we have a lot of new listeners. So you need to look at your life like a house. And what does every, classic suburban house have? They have that picket fence around it, right? So your fence is your boundaries, and your boundaries decide who gets access and gets let into your house, and who is safer staying on the outside of that fence. And so boundaries when it comes to dating are protecting your house, and that can be whatever it looks like for you. I can't hand them to you. I can't tell you what your boundaries should or should not be. That is a lot of personal work. But boundaries are not walls. Boundaries aren't walls that are meant to be broken down. They are just, boundaries aren't walls that are meant to be broken down. Boundaries are just simply your way of knowing what you will and will not tolerate, and your ability to act on that knowledge. Me personally, I'll share with you some of my boundaries that have really helped me decenter men in my life. Take what you need, leave what you don't. First and foremost, stop talking all day, every day. Stop texting all day, every day. Stop communicating so much that when you actually get on the date, you feel like you have nothing to discuss. I think that's what leads to limerence. It's what triggers anxious attachment. And frankly, I think it's what kills connection before it can even really get started, because again, you're killing the ability to yearn for a person. And so, we live in this era of constant communication. I'm such a big fan of a phone call or a FaceTime rather than texting. I would so much rather say, hey, crazy day. Let's hop on a phone call tonight to catch up. I'd love to hear about how your week is going. I think doing that, it also is going to show you very quickly about a man's intentions, because again, if a man is just trying to get in your pants, he's not going to waste 10, 15, 30 minutes on a phone call with you asking you how your day went. And you'll be able to hear that in his tone of voice and how he asks questions, because texting is it's such a mindless act that it really does not mean much. And you also can't hear tone of voice when it comes to texting. A man who wants to be in your life will pick up that phone, or they'll be the one to call you. A man who's just keeping you on the back burner is going to be the one calling you at 11 p.m. at night to ask what you're doing. And there is a clear difference there. I also like to create boundaries around my space. I think, it's so easy to fall into the habit of just hanging out on the couch or whatever. Like, not that there's nothing wrong with that, but I like to create a boundary around my physical space because this is my safe space. And twice in my life have I been made to feel unsafe in my own home, the place I'm supposed to feel safest in the world. And I refuse to have that happen to me ever again. And again, it's not because I see men as the enemy, and it's not simply just about stranger danger and protection. That's not what it's really about. But my space is sacred. My space is mine. I have had it compromised before, men trying to, again, take control of my space. And it's, but when we're not even living together, and, your space should still feel like yours, even when you're not alone in it. And if you feel uneasy around a man in your own home, and I'm not even saying it in an unsafe way, but like if you're with this person and you can't seem to calm down and you feel like an anxiety bubbling up, I know I'll have that a lot. And I'm like, that just tells me this is not the right connection. And it's not about being unsafe. It's just about your space is the most accurate reflection of who you are as a person. Like every choice you make, especially for women, every choice we make in our homes is such a clear description of our personalities, and it's a clear indicator of who we are, our hobbies, our likes, our dislikes. Like I'm looking around my apartment right now. I have my vinyls on the walls. I have my books on the bookshelf. I have cameras everywhere, photos of my family and friends. I have my needlepoint canvases on the wall, like photos I've taken. And it's just such a clear reflection of me and my personality that anyone who is allowed into this space, it's a privilege. And it's almost like the house analogy brought to life. And the big boundary that I have is I will not give up the things that make me myself. And what I mean by that is like my routines, my habits, my Sunday rituals, like any of those things that are what allow me to feel the happiest, healthiest, most confident, most mentally at peace going into a week. I will never compromise those for the sake of a relationship. Like these things are not obstacles to love. They are what make me somebody who is worth loving. And they also make me able to be a better partner because I have calm and clarity. And so if you're dating somebody and you're finding yourself canceling your book club, if you find yourself canceling your book club last minute or no longer going to the gym, like that's a sign that you're probably centering this person too much in your life. Because I want us to remember our self-worth is not measured by our dating life. It's not measured by a man choosing us. Having a boyfriend does not add anything to our value as women. Two things can coexist at once. You can be both deeply committed to a partner and you can be deeply committed to yourself. Those are not obstacles fighting each other. Again, I look at all my friends who are in relationships and long-term relationships. The least interesting thing about them is their partners because they've done such a good job of making sure they're still the center of their own world. And so you need to stop fearing. Your fear of being single should not be greater than your fear of being unhappy. And, I've said it before and I'll say it again. You need to live your life as if you're never going to get married and you're never going to have children. Not because you've given up, but and it's not because you've given up on love, but it's because you want your life to be full of love. You just recognize there's more to life than romantic love. And also with this piece too, something that with decentering men comes decentering our age as women. Because let's be real, we've got men that are in their 40s who are balding, thinking they still have all the time in the world to settle down and have kids. And if they can do it, why can't we? So much. I got my first syringe of filler at 22 years old. I got my first round of Botox at 25 years old. So much of a woman's existence is not just defined by her desire to love. It's defined by her age in all of the wrong ways. And yet the older I get, the less, as scary as getting older is, the less I fear it because I have so many wonderful women in my life to look up to who are older than I am. And I've only seen them get hotter, richer, and wiser. And so why would I not want that for myself? For women, this pressure around age is really just a way to pressure us into making choices that don't entirely align with who you are. And those choices are what would benefit the patriarchy. And so the pressure around age, you're actually costing yourself even more time because you're staying in the wrong relationships, having children with the wrong men, and you're costing yourself opportunities, not just in your career, but your opportunities to explore the world and see new things and pursue the passions that you really crave to. Like, it just makes me think, my grandmother, crazy Noni. I don't think I've really talked about Noni much on the podcast. Noni is I'll tell you this. This should sum up everything you need to know about my grandmother. So obviously you guys know my grandfather passed away almost 3 years ago now. And I went up and took care of him in his final weeks. And I'm so grateful I was able to do that. But shortly after he passed away, I'm staying in touch with my grandmother, of course. And one day she calls me and I get the phone, pick up the phone. I'm like, "Hi, Noni." I'm like checking in on her. I'm like, "Hi, Noni, how are you?" She goes, "Megan, I went to the doctor. I got to tell you something." I'm like, and here I'm just grieving my grandfather. And this lady, she's like, I was like, "Oh God, she's dying too. Like, I'm going to lose both my grandparents." And she goes, "They diagnosed me with COL." I go, and I'm saying, I'm like, "What the fuck is COL? What is COL? I've never heard of this." And she just goes, "Crazy old lady disease." Ah! And she's dying laughing. I was so mad, but it was really funny. But so Noni, she's now in her, I want to say her early 70s, about like mid 70s. She's about in her mid 70s. And growing up, she always encouraged me and my cousins to pursue our creativity and pursue our art because she herself wanted to be a fashion designer. She wanted to go to FIT and she would have gotten in. I've seen her drawings. She was so talented. But she was robbed of that because her father, my great grandfather, made her get married instead and have children instead. And so that's what she did right out of high school. She got married, and my step grandfather to my biological grandfather, the grandfather I talk about is my step grandfather. She got married to him. She obviously had my aunt first and then my mom. And that's all her life. And I think, I love my grandmother. She is batshit crazy. And I think a lot of her crazy comes from the fact that she didn't pursue who she was and who she wanted to be. And instead just, did what you do and got married. And, I'll never forget, I think the happiest I ever saw her is the time in her life when she was a florist, because she was still getting to create in some capacity. And she had such a passion for it. And, partially, I think that light died, of course, because my grandfather got sick and she was taking care of him. But I think a lot of the loss of her light had to do with her inability to do what she loved. And I think that's, when they say, "Oh, women are crazy," I think part of it is because we're conditioned to not live as ourselves. And so, of course, that would make anybody crazy. As much as I joke about my grandmother being crazy, like, it really is sad when you think about it, that I wonder how different her life would have been if she was able to both get married and pursue fashion school. It makes me wonder what my mom and my aunt's life would have looked like growing up. It makes me wonder what my life would look like growing up, if I would even exist as this person I am today. If my mom would have chosen somebody else and if she would have had more confidence in herself. And it makes me look at the generational trauma of the women in my family and the patterns, because all of them centered men in their lives, and all of them have told me not to do that. The only one I think in my family who really has decentered men before it was like the trendy thing to do is my great aunt Marie, who you guys have heard from on the podcast before. If you haven't heard that episode, definitely go listen to it. I'll probably have her back on the podcast this summer when I go visit her at some point. But it just makes you think, like, if historically women started decentering men from their lives sooner, it just makes you wonder how different the world would look and how different women's lives would look, and how, the conversations around dating and men in general would be different. It makes you wonder how men would be different, because they probably would have been raised differently. Decentering men is it's a skill just like anything else. but it comes with time, it comes with age. And I think that's why for women, it's so important too, to decenter your age, because again, though your value as a woman doesn't decrease with age either, yet like we've been conditioned to think it does. So can you decenter men and still want love? Yes, you absolutely can. And it makes you wonder, if you knew you would meet the love of your life in 5 years, would you start decentering him from your life now? Or would you start living your life according to that? And I think you have to get really honest about yourself. Like, would I, if I knew when and where I'd meet them and who they would be, would I start basing my choices around them? Or would I just live according to what I want it for myself and hope that they still fit into that? And the thing is, if they're meant to be, they absolutely will. So is that something you are capable of doing? And yes, you absolutely should be doing that. So decentering is not about building a world without love or without men. It's about building a world where love can thrive out of true desire, not desperation, like women have been conditioned to in the past. Real, true, lasting love, the kind that is worth having in your life, flourishes when two people are whole individuals. And I always say there should be 3 people in every relationship. It should be you, your partner, and then you and your partner. And so that's the version of love that I'm holding out for. I'm holding out for the version of love where, yes, I am a very hyper independent person and I've loved the life I've built, but I am holding out for the love where somebody else has a full life that they love and we can share our lives together and we can continue to build on them together. I'm holding out for the love where, he is such a good man that it really confirms my desire that I want children, because again, I would rather never have children than have children with the wrong man. And I don't want to look at my partner and think, oh my God, I don't want my kids to be just like you. Like, that is the kind of love that I'm holding out for. And I know when it does come into my life, it will 100% have been worth the wait. And because I had to go on all this journey. I had to go through these motions and these experiences and these heartbreaks to come to the conclusions that I have now. And so I don't even look at my past relationships with regret, because each and every one has taught me something about myself, about life, about the world, about love in general. And it's helped me get clear on what it is I actually want in life. And it's helped me come back to myself. So I hope with this episode, you've kind of gotten a little bit more clarity and a little bit more peace around what it truly means to decenter men. And I hope that you've started to think about what boundaries you want to have in dating with men. And just, I hope it's kind of reaffirmed that you can be a lover girl and still live your best life. But that is all for this week's episode of Not the Girl Next Door. Make sure you leave us a 5-star review wherever you're listening. If you don't already, please subscribe to the Tough Love Club. It is our monthly snail mail club where each month you will get one of my photo prints along with a letter describing the theme of the month and journal prompts, stickers, and a bookmark relating to the theme of the month. So you can subscribe to that through the Beacons link, which is always linked in the episode description. Leave us a 5-star review wherever you're listening. Also subscribe to YouTube. We're really trying to grow that. And I will see you guys next week for another episode. Bye for now.